Happy Friday, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Hope you all have had a great week. The tropics continue to gradually come back to life, although nothing is moving very quickly right now. But that is potentially going to be changing here in the next several weeks. We're going to take a look at what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico, as well as across the rest of the Atlantic over the next week. An impactful system battering the Gulf Coast with very heavy rain. We've seen reports of some flooding across parts of Louisiana, and unfortunately, I'd love to say that that's going to come to an end this weekend, but we are going to continue to have a very wet, unsettled pattern heading into next week, as well as potentially a sneaky system here that could develop into a tropical depression or storm heading towards the western Gulf Coast during the first half of next week. The East Coast remains active. Right now, everything is offshore, heading up into Atlantic Canada, but as we head later into next week, a more unsettled pattern developing across a stalled frontal boundary. We could see several storms. Right now, nothing tropical, but a lot more rain coming for portions of the eastern United States, especially Florida, the Carolinas, and up into eastern New England. However, the pattern here where we're sitting here trying to guess at what may or may not pop should start to turn as we get past next weekend, perhaps a more active period coming for the second half of September, continuing into the month of October. And I'm going to talk more about that as well here. Here's a look at what's going on in the Atlantic. Several areas that we're monitoring, but nothing that is developing, at least at this point. We've got an area here just south of Texas over the western Gulf, another area that'll move into the southwest Gulf, and these two may merge into a feature that could become a tropical depression or storm as we get to maybe Monday and early Tuesday of next week. We continue to monitor an area of investigation, Invest 99L, that is moving up the East Coast and will be moving into Nova Scotia tomorrow. And we've got another area of potential development. Does not look like it's in a hurry to develop right now, but something to keep an eye on across the central Atlantic and in the Pacific. We are expecting to see something develop early next week, maybe our next tropical storm in the Pacific. That's a look at the North American side, at least the Western Hemisphere. Looking at the Eastern Hemisphere, we continue to have a destructive Typhoon Yagi, which is moving across South China, heading towards northeastern parts of Vietnam. And this is going to be one of the strongest typhoons to hit China in over a decade. A very destructive storm, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. A couple of other areas to watch right now, and a non-impactful tropical storm moving away from the east coast of Japan. Here's the 4 areas in yellow, really 5 if you count the Pacific. Nothing extremely in a rush to develop right now. And 2 competing areas here in the Western Gulf, 90L off the Texas coast, a new area to watch that we've tracked across the Caribbean that has not yet developed. It may have a chance of finally doing that early next week. 99L, a non-tropical system getting ready to move out of the warm water into cooler waters, but sending gusty winds and rain into Nova Scotia, eastern New Brunswick, and PEI as we get into the overnight hours tonight and especially the first part of tomorrow. And a 10% area of just a disjointed mess right now in the central Atlantic that down the road may have some reason to watch, but right now does not show us any signs of development. Here's a look at the Atlantic here, and we can see this is Invest 99L. It's got a spin to it, but that's about it. This is Invest 90L in the Northwest Gulf. This is a wave moving into Belize that is going to move into the Bay of Campeche. These two are going to actually merge into a feature next week, and that will provide us with something to watch, I believe, finally. And we are going to see a flare up in here to keep an eye on early next week off the Mexican Riviera. The Caribbean's looking great. We have some rain across the southwest, but pretty quiet elsewhere. We've got low pressure here moving north of the islands. We've got another wave behind it in here, and a lot of wind shear coming in out of the south and west, keeping things at bay for the time being. A lot of sinking air as well in this portion of the Atlantic. So waves that are coming across are fizzling as they do so. That should continue to be the case at least for another week. But then after that, I think things are going to start to turn more active. Here's a closer look at the Caribbean. You can see clearing out for the most part across Cuba, Jamaica, the Hispaniola, and the rest of the Greater Antilles. Florida, a little bit quieter today than yesterday, but the Northern Gulf remains very active, and that is obviously never a good sign this time of the year. Wind shear has been our friend right now. It's still not stopping the rain from falling, but it is keeping things at bay from developing into anything tropical. And you can see here a weak circulation now approaching the islands from the north. We're going to see some gusty winds and heavy rain over the Virgin Islands and the Leeward Islands, eventually over parts of Puerto Rico, but not expecting development from this feature here, at least in the next few days. All right, this is Invest 90L. And this is Houston right here. This is Galveston right here. This is Lake Charles, Louisiana. And here is where our low pressure is centered. And it's actually moving southward, getting pushed south by a cold front and trough that is moving through the central and eastern United States, going to produce some gusty storms over parts of the Great Lakes today into the northeast early tomorrow. That front's kicking everything southward. So right now we do have a big flare-up of storms near the Louisiana coastline and some gustier showers over water, but no real signs of organization just yet. Now, over time, this is expected to continue to drift southward and the waters stay warm. What we really need to see is wind shear dropping off, and that is certainly looking like a possibility, but not yet a slam dunk. And as a result, you can see the chances for development into a tropical storm between now and Sunday morning are not exactly super low, 30% to maybe 40% here. We also have this other wave to keep an eye on moving into the Bay of Campeche, and take a look at tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Sunday. We see a chance up to as much as 70 to 80% of something to form here. Now, this is looking at all the ensembles, so it is not the official forecast from the Hurricane Center. It's just kind of some computer model guidance at this point, but you can see the chances continue to climb here across the Western Gulf, whether it be this feature or a mix of the two, still to be determined. But you can see a pretty decent chance we have something here for the first half of next week. If we go by day here, I'll show you kind of the breakdown for each day. This is between now and this evening. This is during the day tomorrow into tomorrow night. See the chances for this to maybe develop. Then the following system behind it has a better chance. This one starts to fade. This is going to be for Sunday and Sunday night. Here's Monday. Here's Tuesday, and here's Wednesday, and it finally kind of goes away. So, yeah, definitely something to watch here, and we've continued to talk about it. And until something develops, I will continue to talk about it. And when it develops, I'll also talk about it, because either way, you're going to be talking lots of rain here over the Gulf of Mexico. 10-inch potential between now and the 15th of September. That's next weekend in Brownsville. 7-inch potential in Corpus Christi, a foot possible. Places like Lake Jackson, Galveston, 6 to 8 inches in Houston, 8 to 9 around Port Arthur and Beaumont, and Sabine here, 7 inches in Lake Charles, 5 in Baton Rouge, 10 in Houma Thibodaux, close to 10 in New Orleans, 15 in Boothville and near the mouth of the Mississippi River. And as we take that farther to the east, let me move this here for you guys. I didn't load 2 extra images. We can see it's not just the Western Gulf, but lots of rain coming to places like Pensacola. A foot could be possible here around Pensacola Beach, maybe up to 8 inches around Panama City Beach, and still pretty wet as well across northeastern Florida. And we are going to have to watch the East Coast as well. Not so much over the next few days, but as we head into next week and beyond, we start to see an increase in moisture coming up the East Coast. Right now, model averages just pin us at a couple of inches around the Outer Banks and an inch or so in the Hampton Roads area, but this could certainly still change. Here is a look at what's going on in the Gulf. 2 separate features, both of which are weak for the time being. The first one tracks slowly southward. The second one tracks northwest, and the two are set to meet here at some point on Monday, it looks like. Tough to say if this one takes over, they combine, or they compete with each other. There's a lot of wind shear still. But you can see we are likely to have something in the Western Gulf. And if it does get drifted north, or if it does get tugged northward, the time frame on it coming into Texas could be as soon as Tuesday or early Wednesday for deep South Texas, or Wednesday night or Thursday for the upper coast into Louisiana. This area has been a hot spot. You remember Beryl, of course. Well, we unfortunately have more coming here in the coming days. I don't think intensity is going to be super strong, but we'll have to take a look at that depending on how this maybe takes shape. We do have tropical models now running on this. Again, it's still kind of a blob. It's not very well organized, but the models are showing that low pressure is to the east of Corpus Christi and to the south of Galveston. You kind of draw the line here and the line here. This is where the center is. And generally speaking, it's going to be heading southward here through the weekend. After that, it gets stuck down in here. It may merge with the feature coming up in this direction and then try to get kicked back. Now, there's a shift in the models a little bit farther west. Some models bring it up towards Houston. Others pull it into northeast Mexico and deep South Texas. But you can see, regardless, the system is not in a hurry to move. It's going to be bringing lots of rain with it over the next several days. Intensity forecast, I would not put a lot of stock in this, but generally speaking, About half the models show it becoming a tropical storm or a stronger depression. Other half don't even develop it at all, but probably somewhere in here, most likely, until we get to about next Wednesday. So that's what we're looking at, assuming this thing does develop. The Icon model has been showing that for a while now. Other models are struggling with it, but you can see reaches its farthest south point here late Sunday night, early Monday morning as maybe a tropical depression. Then pressures do drop a little bit as it drifts back to the north-northwest, and this is going to be Monday night, Tuesday morning when it's very possible, if this model is correct, we could see a tropical storm watch or even a warning for the Texas coastline as soon as Sunday night, Monday morning. We may even see something into southwestern Louisiana. I've seen other models bringing this close to New Orleans. Right now, they've shifted a bit to the west, but maybe a landfalling system here Tuesday night into Wednesday. Here's a look at the just in general, a tropical model showing a ton of dry air across most of the South except the Gulf Coast. We do see lowering pressures in the southwestern Gulf into Sunday. And this looks a little bit more organized now that we've got a good amount of moisture in place. Notice how right now it's struggling with dry air on its western side. As the system drops south, it gets into a more favorable spot where it picks up some moisture. It'll fight wind shear, but at this point, it's going to be in a more favorable environment Sunday night and Monday. And this particular model brings it up towards the Houston region here as a stronger tropical storm Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. This is looks kind of eerily similar to Beryl. It won't be as strong, but notice where it's tracking at this point. Here's a look at the wind shear forecast from the HAFS model. You can see lots of red indicating a lot of hostile wind shear here over the northern Gulf, but lower wind shear in the middle of the Gulf. Question mark right now is, where does low pressure end up going? Because if it stays in the red, it's not going to develop very quickly, but if it drifts into the whites and the blues over here, then it is going to have a chance to develop. Warm waters are in place, and as the wind shear cuts down, that will certainly favor intensification. Now, as the system comes back north, it does hit wind shear again. So I don't think this is going to be a stronger storm. You know, I'm not going to ever discount a hurricane. It is the Gulf in September, but not looking super likely with this wind shear, just a little bit too strong at this point. Here's a look at potential wind gusts from this one particular model, windiest offshore, but you can see it is picking up some wind and some intensity here as we get to Saturday and Sunday. This may not be perfectly correct, but you can see there's going to be a growing wind field, but nothing really organized near the center, just a very disheveled system. If the center is over here with very little wind, we will still potentially see some stronger winds somewhere on the northern side and back across the Mexican coast. As that front drops south, it increases our pressure gradient. That means going to be windy regardless, but we may not have an organized system yet. And then you can see it starts to pull together here in the final hours before coming into Houston. And I really hope this doesn't hold, but it is showing wind gusts over 50 miles per hour to even 70 near Galveston, as well as across the coastal bend. Beryl hit this exact same area just like this, came up in here. This system, unfortunately, has a similar forecast according to this model run. Let's look at another tropical model, though, and this will disagree with what I just showed you. This is the HWRF. And you can see it's got one circulation here and one over here. This is Louisiana up in here. So a much different flavor than what I just showed you. I do want to show this to show you that I'm not just going off of one model, but that there are several different possibilities. And you can see here, generally speaking, it's going south, but as it pulls northward, it is not strengthening, and it's kind of fighting off the coast here and eventually making a landfall early Wednesday morning near Brownsville. This would be a much better scenario for Houston and Louisiana if this ends up being correct. We don't quite know yet. We just have to kind of monitor at this point. All right, looking at the rest of the Atlantic, this is Invest 99L right here. You can see a lot of dry air and wind shear moving in, but a lot of rain and thunderstorms. It's going to quickly move up towards Nova Scotia tonight into tomorrow. Then I'll be done talking about it for the time being. Here's a look at the visible satellite, and this is just on the edge of the screen. This is Long Island over here. This is coastal Massachusetts, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard. The low is somewhere in here, but it is not producing thunderstorms over its center. There are tropical storm force winds for sure up in here, but not really a tropical system, and about to lose its window to develop. You can see a little after lunchtime tomorrow, it's already moving into Nova Scotia and into Prince Edward Island. And the intensity forecast is tropical storm strength, but it's not tropical. So the winds are there, but the circulation is not. Finally, we're going to take a look at the icon real quick, and we'll just look at the timing. You'll see the pressure drops. This is going to be more like a nor'easter than a tropical system. Highest winds will be over eastern Nova Scotia and over eastern PEI, and they should drop off here by tomorrow evening. But we continue to have a front moving offshore the east coast here. It'll be a lot cooler and more comfortable by Sunday, and that's going to bring gusty winds back to the exact same areas. And the pattern kind of repeats itself where we stay unsettled. Big high here next week, but then that high shifts away, and we will start to have to keep an eye on the east coast beyond that time frame. Here's a look at rainfall totals for Nova Scotia, 30 to 50 millimeters. Same goes for southeastern New Brunswick and western PEI. We could see locally higher amounts, maybe some localized flooding, but this system's going to be moving pretty quickly. Looking at the rest of the Atlantic, it's not favorable for development. We've got yellow areas to watch here and here, but as you can see, nothing is in a rush to develop at this point. Some sinking air, some wind shear, all of which are creating a hostile environment right now. Doesn't mean we need to let our guard down, just means nothing's likely to pop. And then you can see Africa shows us more waves getting ready to come across. This one here looks impressive, but it's awfully far north to develop. It's going to basically hit this area and die. But the ones behind it are starting to show, at least on the longer term models, something we need to be watching. And I'll show you why that is. The browns here indicate unfavorable lifting mechanisms for storms to form this weekend. As we get to next week, it gets a little bit more favorable, but then becomes unfavorable again the following week. As we get past the 16th, though, you can see things start to turn more favorable during the week of the 16th of September. And the following week also looks favorable. There'll be some pauses in that, but again, the beginning of October right now looking a lot more favorable here as we see just more rising motion versus the sinking air we've seen for the last month or so. As a result, the European is forecasting more action. Right now, this green indicates 40% of average activity for this upcoming week. That obviously is very quiet. Following week, we get up to about 60%, and then the week of the 23rd, we're up to 120%. So we are heading into a more favorable pattern where the official forecast is going to be for more action than what you would expect during an already busy time here for the final week of the month of September. And the first week of October remains very active, 60%. Doesn't mean we know where something's going to hit, but it does mean hurricanes are obviously going to be a lot more likely at that point. And in the longer term, we do see at least a signal for a storm around the 14th and 15th over the central Atlantic. This is the European, this is the Canadian, and this is the GFS. It's probably overdone with this feature and underdone with this feature. Over time, though, it is something we need to watch. Again, here is, let me back that up one. Here's the European starting to develop something here. This is the Canadian, and the GFS is farther south and west. It's been bouncing around, but all are showing a tropical system here around the 15th and 16th of September, something you need to keep an eye on in the islands. The GFS model has shown some interesting scenarios here. I don't want you to get too carried away with any one solution, but showing a hurricane that may threaten Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, and Bermuda here during the week of the 16th. This was the run from earlier today. The one before it was weaker and farther south, but did have a hurricane moving through the islands. The one yesterday, I'm going to show it, but please don't kill me. Showing a powerful storm taking the Maria track and continuing and taking kind of a Hurricane Floyd or Isabel track into North Carolina. But as you can see, there's a lot of error and a lot of difference in these models here. The latest run isn't developing it again, so we've got a lot of time. All right, last we're going to talk about Typhoon Yagi. Still a very powerful storm, the strongest to hit China, potentially on record, with pressures down into the high 910s. That's almost Category 5 strength. Just dealing a nasty blow to Hainan. That's this island, this tropical island here in South China. Now still holding together and likely to take aim on northeast Vietnam as a very powerful system. Winds are 140 miles per hour. It went right over Haikou here. That's a very big city here with millions of Chinese folks living there. And now, unfortunately, because it kind of shot the gap, it is going to take longer to weaken and will likely hit as at least a Category 2 typhoon here in northeast Vietnam. Really nasty setup and a storm that unfortunately is probably going to lead to a lot of destruction here over the next couple of days before it dissipates. So I appreciate y'all's time today. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. I'll try to get back on here tomorrow. But as always, I thank you for your time. I ask you to subscribe and share with your friends. And I thank you, and I give all the honor and glory to God. He gives me this gift as a meteorologist to share everything with you guys. I think everybody here has a gift and a purpose. This is mine. And it's just an awesome opportunity to honor God for me personally. Whether or not you believe that, that is totally up to you. I'm not going to help you or tell you one way or the other, but I will say that there is good news for those who do believe God. John 8:12 says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And it's a dark world out there. And I truly believe that before I became a Christian, all I felt and saw was darkness, evil, negativity. I'm not saying that I can control anything. That's up to God. But having the ability to believe in God gives me that hope that I did not have before I became a Christian. And that is the light of Jesus Christ. I pray that you have that light in your life. And I thank you for joining me here today. I will talk to you again soon. Have a wonderful day. See ya.